World War II spy films rarely show explosions or victory parades. Instead, they reveal something far more disturbing.
Now bring me the film. On your knees.
Silence, fear, paperwork, betrayal, and choices that kill slowly. These stories are uncomfortable because they feel true. They show intelligence work as it really was, cold, methodical, and unforgiving. What follows are spy films that strip away hero myths and expose the war behind closed doors. Number 12, Army of Shadows, 1969. Army of Shadows is not a war movie in the traditional sense. It contains almost no battlefield action and no triumphant speeches.
Trouve bien gonflé de te balader en veste de pilote.
Je les emmerde.
Instead, it unfolds like a slow tightening noose. The film follows members of the French resistance as they operate under constant threat of arrest, torture, and execution. Espionage here is not glamorous or clever. It is exhausting, isolating, and morally corrosive. What makes the film feel uncomfortably real is its complete rejection of sentimentality.
Éterniser des jours, des semaines, qui sait.
Resistance members are not portrayed as fearless patriots. They are cautious, paranoid, and emotionally numb. Trust is limited. Conversations are measured. Every action is taken with the knowledge that it may result in death not only for oneself, but for others. The film treats betrayal as inevitable rather than shocking. Informants are not monsters. They are frightened humans who break under pressure. One of the most disturbing aspects is how the film depicts internal executions. When a member is suspected of collaboration, the group does not debate morality. They discuss logistics, how to kill quietly, where to hide the body, how to avoid attention. The act is shown without music or emotional framing. This procedural coldness is exactly what gives the film its power. It reflects how survival required emotional shutdown. The film also understands time as an enemy. Resistance work involves waiting for messages, waiting for arrests, waiting for death. This pacing mirrors real intelligence operations where long periods of inactivity are punctuated by moments of irreversible consequence. There is no sense of progress, only endurance. Army of Shadows remains one of the most accurate portraits of wartime espionage because it shows resistance as attrition. Victory is abstract, survival is temporary. Every success simply delays the inevitable reckoning. The film ends not with triumph, but with disappearance, which is precisely how most real resistance stories concluded. Number 11, The Man Who Never Was, 1956. The Man Who Never Was tells one of the most extraordinary intelligence stories of the Second World War, yet it does so with restraint and discipline. The film dramatizes Operation Mincemeat, the Allied deception plan that involved planting false invasion documents on a corpse and allowing German intelligence to discover it. What makes the story chilling is how much depends on paperwork behavior and patience rather than action. This film understands espionage as administrative warfare. Every detail matters: the handwriting, the creases in letters.
Hello?
Is that the American Library?
Yes?
The theater ticket stubs in the dead man's pocket. Intelligence officers do not rely on luck. They rely on anticipating how the enemy thinks. The film spends significant time showing how British planners obsess over plausibility. They debate whether a fiancé would write in this tone, whether a superior officer would phrase a memo that way. These details are not dramatic in a traditional sense, yet they are where the real tension lies. What gives the film its uncomfortable realism is the moral detachment required to use a human body as a weapon. The dead man is given a false identity and a fictional emotional life. He becomes a tool. The film does not sensationalize this act.
Will you drive me to number 57 Landsmere Gardens, please?
57 Landsmere.
It treats it as necessary. That quiet acceptance reflects the mindset of wartime intelligence. Personal dignity is secondary to strategic outcome. There is also no guarantee of success. Much of the film is spent waiting to see whether German intelligence will accept the deception. The protagonist cannot intervene once the plan is in motion. They can only observe. This helplessness is rare in spy cinema, yet common in real operations where control ends once information is released. The Man Who Never Was feels real because it respects intelligence work as slow, meticulous, and deeply impersonal. The fate of thousands hinges on whether a single lie is believed, not through force, but through paperwork. Number 10, Five Graves to Cairo, 1943. Five Graves to Cairo presents espionage not as mastery but as improvisation under terror.
I had a song.
Set in the North African campaign, the story follows a British soldier who survives an attack and assumes the identity of a dead German officer inside a desert hotel used as a covert meeting place. From that moment, the film becomes a study in sustained psychological pressure. The realism comes from how fragile the deception is. The protagonist is not a trained spy. He lacks fluency, confidence, and experience. Every conversation is a test. Every question risks exposure. The film repeatedly emphasizes how difficult it is to maintain a false identity even briefly.
Save them the trouble of translation when they intercept this.
Memory slips. Body language betrays fear. Small mistakes accumulate. This reflects historical reality. Many wartime intelligence successes were achieved by individuals forced into roles they were not prepared for. The desert setting reinforces isolation. There is no support network, no easy escape. Espionage here is survival-driven rather than strategic. Information is extracted not through gadgets but through listening and observation. The film shows intelligence gathering as something that happens in pauses, glances, and overheard remarks rather than elaborate schemes. Importantly, the enemy is not portrayed as incompetent. German officers are observant, disciplined, and suspicious. This mutual tension elevates the film beyond propaganda. It acknowledges that espionage success often depended on luck timing and the enemy's internal assumptions rather than superiority. Five Graves to Cairo also understands that intelligence work frequently overlaps with ordinary human behavior. Eating together, drinking together, making casual remarks. These moments are where danger lives, not in gunfire. The film remains unsettling because it shows how easily identity can be erased and replaced during war. Survival sometimes required becoming someone else entirely, even for a few hours, and those hours could decide entire campaigns. Number 9. Black Book, 2006. Black Book dismantles the comforting myth of clean resistance narratives. Set in Nazi-occupied Netherlands, the film follows a Jewish singer who infiltrates German intelligence while working for the resistance. From the outset, the film makes clear that espionage is not about heroism. It is about compromise, humiliation, and irreversible moral damage. What makes Black Book feel disturbingly real is its refusal to draw clear moral lines. Resistance fighters are not portrayed as unified or noble. They are fragmented, suspicious, and sometimes cruel. Internal power struggles rival the threat posed by the enemy. Informants operate within resistance cells. Personal grudges influence life or death decisions. The film captures the historical reality that underground movements were vulnerable not only to Gestapo pressure, but to internal collapse.
De plank er even afgooien.
Gaat u niet mee?
Nee, vanaf hier neemt de schipper het over.
The protagonist's role requires constant performance. She must adapt her identity depending on who is watching. German officers see one version. Resistance leaders see another. Her real self becomes inaccessible even to herself. This erosion of identity mirrors documented experiences of undercover operatives who reported long-term psychological damage after the war. The film also confronts the aftermath of espionage. Liberation does not bring justice. It brings revenge, chaos, and public punishment. Collaborators are humiliated sometimes without evidence.
Dat wil je neven.
Dank u. Ganz schön schwer, was?
Innocence offers no protection once paranoia takes hold. This post-war reckoning is often absent from spy films, yet it is historically accurate. Many resistance veterans describe the end of occupation as morally confusing rather than triumphant. Violence in Black Book is sudden and unceremonious. Arrests happen without warning. Torture is implied rather than dramatized, which makes it more disturbing. Death often comes off screen, reinforcing how disposable lives were in intelligence warfare. Black Book endures because it shows espionage as contamination. Once someone enters that world, there is no clean exit. Victory does not restore what was lost. It simply ends the immediate threat. The damage remains. Number 8. Eye of the Needle, 1981. Eye of the Needle is one of the rare films that portrays enemy intelligence with chilling credibility. The story centers on a German spy embedded in Britain whose mission involves discovering the truth about the Allied invasion plans. The film avoids caricature. The spy is not flamboyant or sadistic. He is methodical, disciplined, and emotionally vacant, which is precisely what makes him believable. The film emphasizes solitude. Espionage is shown as a lonely existence defined by secrecy and restraint. The spy operates without support or recognition. His handlers are distant. His survival depends entirely on his ability to remain unnoticed. This reflects the reality of long-term intelligence assets who often worked alone for years. What gives the film its uncomfortable realism is how close the deception comes to failure. The German intelligence apparatus is portrayed as competent. British counterintelligence is equally cautious. Success hinges on coincidence, geography, and human error.
Do that. I've got no one else here to help me.
Rather than brilliance. This fragility mirrors historical operations where entire campaigns were jeopardized by chance encounters. The setting reinforces vulnerability. Remote islands, rural villages, and isolated coastlines create spaces where surveillance is limited, but danger is constant. The film uses quiet environments rather than urban centers to show how espionage thrives in isolation. Violence in Eye of the Needle is restrained but final, When it occurs, it is swift and purposeful. There are no prolonged confrontations. This aligns with real intelligence doctrine where exposure often meant immediate elimination.
Now bring me the film. On your knees.
The film also acknowledges the emotional cost for civilians caught in espionage conflicts. Ordinary people become collateral participants. Their trust is exploited. Their safety is secondary to strategic necessity. Eye of the Needle remains effective because it treats espionage as a zero-sum discipline. There is no redemption arc, only objectives. If the mission succeeds, history changes. If it fails, the spy disappears. Either way, the individual is irrelevant, which is exactly how intelligence agencies viewed their operatives. Number 7. The Counterfeit Trader, 1962. The Counterfeit Trader explores a less commonly depicted aspect of wartime espionage, industrial intelligence. Based on real events, the film follows an American businessman who becomes an intelligence asset while maintaining commercial relationships with Nazi Germany.
Now we would like to find out how well you knew her.
The story highlights how espionage often occurred within legal business frameworks rather than shadowy back alleys. What makes the film feel authentic is its emphasis on ambiguity. The protagonist is not a trained spy. He is a civilian navigating contracts, negotiations, and factory inspections. Intelligence is gathered through access rather than infiltration. This reflects the historical reality that much wartime intelligence came from engineers, traders, and executives rather than agents. The psychological strain is central. The protagonist must appear cooperative with the Nazi regime while secretly undermining it. Every business meeting becomes a potential exposure. Every success increases suspicion. Unlike traditional spies, he cannot disappear or change identity. His public life is the cover. The film captures how intelligence work often relied on proximity rather than secrecy. Access to production facilities, transport networks, and supply chains provided crucial information. These environments were heavily monitored. Mistakes were unforgiving. Importantly, the film addresses moral compromise. The protagonist profits financially while assisting the enemy even as he aids the allies. This duality creates internal conflict without easy resolution. Intelligence work rarely allowed moral purity. Contribution was measured by outcome, not intent. The Counterfeit Trader also highlights bureaucratic distance. Intelligence handlers remain detached. Risk is transferred downward. If the asset is exposed, there will be no rescue. This asymmetry reflects historical intelligence relationships where civilians bore extreme risk
Of man, and he doesn't react too kindly.
without formal protection. The film remains unsettling because it shows espionage embedded within normal life. Contracts, factories, dinners, and travel become weapons. War is not always fought in uniform. Sometimes it is fought with invoices. Number 6. Charlotte Gray, 2001. Charlotte Gray strips espionage of masculine myth and replaces it with fear, isolation, and endurance. Set in occupied France, the film follows a Scottish woman recruited by British intelligence and sent into the resistance network.
А я опять буду обсуждать поэзию с каким-нибудь занудой.
What separates this story from conventional spy narratives is its focus on vulnerability rather than capability. The film understands that many wartime agents were ordinary people trained quickly and deployed into environments where mistakes meant torture or death. Charlotte is not portrayed as naturally skilled. She struggles with codes, accents, and emotional control. Her fear is visible. This lack of polish mirrors historical accounts from female operatives who described constant anxiety rather than confidence. The realism comes from how limited her agency truly is. Orders arrive sporadically.
Вы говорите по-французски?
Да.
Instructions are vague. Radio contact is unreliable. She must make decisions without guidance, knowing that any misstep could compromise entire networks. Intelligence work here is shown as isolation rather than teamwork. The film also depicts the gendered dimension of espionage without romanticism. Female agents were often underestimated, which provided access but also increased danger. Their bodies became tools of survival and suspicion simultaneously. Charlotte must endure invasive scrutiny from both enemy forces and allies. Trust is conditional and fragile. What makes the film uncomfortable is its portrayal of civilian cost. Espionage activity triggers reprisals, villages suffer, innocents disappear. The protagonist witnesses the consequences of intelligence decisions made far above her level. There is no illusion that intelligence work saves lives cleanly. It redistributes suffering. Charlotte Gray also refuses a triumphant ending. Survival does not equal victory. Trauma lingers, loss is permanent. The war leaves marks that intelligent success cannot erase. The film remains effective because it shows espionage as endurance rather than triumph. The true challenge is not completing the mission. It is living with what was done to complete it. Number 5. Allied, 2016. Allied approaches. World War II espionage from an angle rarely explored with seriousness. Counterintelligence within marriage. The film centers on two intelligence operatives whose relationship becomes the subject of suspicion. Rather than focusing on enemy infiltration, the story examines how intelligence culture corrodes personal trust. The realism lies in how paranoia is institutionalized. Intelligence agencies are depicted as systems that value verification over loyalty. Love provides no exemption.
Agent des Reichs.
Suspicion is not emotional, it is procedural. Evidence must be gathered regardless of consequence. This mirrors historical counterintelligence practices where personal relationships were considered vulnerabilities. The film captures the psychological cruelty of intelligence protocols. The protagonist is required to investigate his own spouse. Every gesture becomes ambiguous. Intimacy becomes data. Silence becomes evidence. This collapse of personal reality into professional obligation is deeply unsettling. Espionage in Allied is not about gadgets or disguises.
And my left retina is detached.
It is about patience and observation. Surveillance occurs within domestic space. The home becomes hostile territory. This inversion reflects real intelligence environments where danger was often closest to safety. The film also highlights how intelligence work demanded emotional compartmentalization. Operatives were trained to accept outcomes without visible reaction. This conditioning is portrayed not as strength, but as damage. The inability to process grief becomes a liability rather than an asset. Violence in Allied is restrained but devastating. When decisions are made, they are irreversible. The film refuses catharsis. It ends with quiet consequence rather than dramatic closure. Allied feels real because it acknowledges that espionage destroys trust by design. The job requires disbelief of sincerity. Once suspicion is normalized, no relationship survives intact. That truth extends beyond war and into the institutions that carry its legacy. Number 4. Hangmen Also Die, 1943. Hangmen Also Die presents resistance espionage as collective punishment rather than heroic rebellion. Inspired by real events following the assassination of a high-ranking Nazi official, the film examines the retaliatory machinery of occupation. Espionage here is inseparable from consequence. The film avoids celebrating assassination as victory. Instead, it focuses on what follows: reprisals, arrests, and executions of civilians. Intelligence success triggers suffering on a scale far beyond the original act. This dynamic was historically accurate and widely documented in occupied Europe. The realism lies in how resistance networks absorb guilt. Civilians lie to protect operatives. Communities accept risk without consent.
That lipstick on the doctor's face looked so perfect, not like this.
Survival becomes communal rather than individual. The film shows how espionage forces ordinary people into moral decisions they never sought. German counterintelligence is portrayed as methodical and patient. Investigations rely on pressure rather than haste. The occupiers exploit fear to extract information. This slow tightening of control mirrors real Gestapo tactics. The resistance itself is not unified. Members disagree on tactics and responsibility. Some advocate sacrifice.
Even the Gestapo couldn't be as inhuman as you are!
Others resist further action. This internal conflict reflects historical divisions within underground movements. Hangmen Also Die remains unsettling because it frames espionage as a chain reaction. One act produces many deaths. Responsibility is diffused. Justice becomes abstract. The film refuses to isolate heroism from consequence. Its enduring power comes from its honesty. Intelligence victories are measured in strategic impact, not moral comfort. The dead do not disappear when the mission succeeds. They accumulate. Number 3. Lacombe Lucien, 1974. Lacombe Lucien is one of the most disturbing World War II spy films ever made because it refuses to frame espionage as ideology. Instead, it presents it as accident, opportunity, and moral emptiness. The film follows a rural French teenager who drifts into collaboration with the Gestapo not out of belief but convenience. Espionage here is not driven by politics. It is driven by access. What makes the film feel uncomfortably real is its banality. Lucien does not seek power or purpose. He simply finds himself useful. Intelligence work is shown as something that absorbs the weak, the bored, and the uncommitted. This aligns with historical records showing that many collaborators were not ideological zealots, but ordinary people responding to incentives. The film strips espionage of intentionality. Information is gathered casually. Names are overheard. Doors are opened. Violence follows without reflection. The absence of internal conflict is what makes the story chilling. Lucien does not struggle with guilt. He adapts. This emotional vacancy mirrors documented collaborator psychology where survival eclipsed morality. German intelligence officers are portrayed not as monsters, but as administrators. They drink, socialize, and conduct business. Their normalcy is deeply unsettling. Espionage is embedded in routine. Arrests are processed like paperwork. Lives are reduced to files. The resistance is not romanticized. Its members are cautious, fragmented, and constantly endangered by leaks that come not from traitors, but from chance encounters. The film suggests that intelligence failure often stemmed from unpredictability rather than betrayal. Lucian remains disturbing because it implies that espionage systems do not require evil to function. They require opportunity. Once access is granted, damage follows regardless of intent. This film feels real because it denies audiences the comfort of heroes. Espionage emerges as a machine that absorbs whoever wanders too close. Number 2. The Imitation Game, 2014, portrays World War II espionage as an exercise in delayed truth. Set within the British code-breaking operation at Bletchley Park, the film focuses on intelligence as information management rather than battlefield intervention. What makes it unsettling is not what the characters do, but what they choose not to do. The film accurately captures the central cruelty of intelligence work, knowing the future without the power to stop it. Once German communications are decrypted, Allied leaders must decide which attacks to prevent and which to allow in order to protect the secret. Espionage success becomes indistinguishable from complicity. This moral arithmetic is the film's greatest strength. Lives are treated as variables. Decisions are framed statistically. Emotional responses are liabilities. The film shows how intelligence work required psychological detachment on an industrial scale. The environment reinforces pressure. Long hours, isolation, secrecy, and surveillance dominate daily life. The team operates under constant threat not from the enemy, but from internal suspicion. A single mistake could compromise the entire operation. This internal fragility reflects historical reality, where secrecy was enforced ruthlessly. What makes the story feel real is its depiction of aftermath. Codebreakers were sworn to silence for decades. Their contributions remained classified. Trauma went unacknowledged. Victory erased their suffering rather than honoring it. The Imitation Game is not unsettling because of action. It is unsettling because of restraint. Intelligence success requires letting tragedy occur. That truth contradicts every heroic narrative. Espionage here is not about stopping evil. It is about choosing which evil is acceptable. That discomfort lingers long after the film ends. Number 1. Operation Daybreak, 1975. Operation Daybreak stands as one of the most historically precise depictions of a real World War II intelligence mission. The film recounts the assassination of Reinhard Heydrich and the catastrophic consequences that followed. Unlike most spy films, it does not frame the mission as triumph, it frames it as inevitability. The realism begins with preparation. The operatives are trained but imperfect. Equipment malfunctions.
Nazis. Welcome home. Oh, God.
Communication fails. Planning collapses under pressure. These elements align closely with historical records of the operation, which was plagued by uncertainty. What distinguishes the film is its refusal to soften the aftermath. The assassination triggers massive reprisals. Entire villages are destroyed. Civilians are executed. The operatives are hunted without mercy. The film dedicates as much time to consequence as to execution. This balance is rare and essential. Espionage here is not cleverness, it is sacrifice. The mission is understood from the start as suicidal. There is no escape plan. Success is measured not by survival but by message sent. This reflects real SOE doctrine where certain missions were knowingly fatal. The final stand is depicted without romantic framing. Ammunition runs out. Wounds accumulate. Time expires. The film emphasizes exhaustion rather than valor. Death arrives quietly. Operation Daybreak feels real because it acknowledges that intelligence victories are often indistinguishable from tragedies. Strategic success does not protect the innocent. It exposes them. The film ends not with liberation but silence, which is historically accurate. For those involved, there was no victory parade, only absence. World War II espionage was never about glamour or clever disguises. It was about silence, delay, and decisions made in rooms without windows.
They were dropped after us. Where are the others?
These films endure because they refuse comfort. They show intelligence work as it truly was, cold, procedural, and unforgiving. Victory came not from heroics but from choices that haunted survivors long after the war ended. These stories still feel real because the cost was never paid in full.